Yo, what up, C10 Nation? This is Ronnie from C10 Talk. C10 Talk is one of those podcast things. We talk C10 trucks, tech, and people. That's right, people. Because it's the people that make the scene so rad-ass. The trucks are cool, but the people are cooler. You can check out the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, C10Talk.com, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Thanks for checking out our latest video and being part of the C10 Nation. C10 Talk coming at you. Hagerty, valuations. What's your truck worth? Do I have a Blazer? Do I have a C10, a K10? Does it really matter? Greg Ingold from Hagerty and the valuation team sit down with C10 Talk. We talk about numbers, we talk about money, and who doesn't want to know, is it a good investment? Am I throwing my money away? It's all part of it. It's a passion, it's a hobby, but it's good to hear, hey, the C10 Nation and the trucks that we buy and pursue, you know, they've got some value there. So it's kind of cool to see that when you think about the comparison of the old hot rods, the muscle car, the Camaros, and the C10s have a namesake there as well. So I like doing these videos. It's cool to see, for you guys to be able to see both the guests and I talk back and forth. So if you like it, subscribe and leave us a comment and let us know. YouTube channel, C10 Talk, episode 185 coming at you. Don't forget to support the sponsors as well. They make it possible for us to sit down and grab these great guests and bring it to you, the C10 Nation. Thanks, guys.
I think it's going. Says it's going.
Right.
I'm not the Zoom specialist, but good. Okay, we've got it going on. All right, guys, C10 Nation. All right. Welcome to C10 Nation, C10 Talk. We've got Greg Ingold, Associate Editor of Hagerty Price Guide. I recently listened to Greg on a podcast, reached out to him, and all the way from Traverse City, Michigan. We're glad to have you on, brother. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
It's a good movement right now. I mean, I think for the C10 world that we live in, and I kind of incorporate all of us, the C10, the K10, you've got a beautiful chalet there, the K5s, the C5s, or the K5s, however you want to look at it. It's a good movement. So that's why I think it's kind of a great topic, and you're the guest to have on when we think about some of the values that we see with our trucks, our hobby, and our passion.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And, personally, I'm a big Chevy truck fan. I've owned a few square bodies in the past, a few GMT 400s, so I've been in it for a while.
Well, I like the GMT 400 thing, and obviously a square body too, but I think the GMT 400, because it's a newer, older vehicle, we'll definitely get into that. So tell us a little bit about Greg and how you got into being a valuation and/or insurance guy.
Yeah, so I come from an insurance family. That's not something that I really thought I'd be getting into. In fact, it's something that I actively avoided for a while. But Hagerty is kind of a unique spot where if you are into old cars and trucks and motorcycles and whatnot, it's really a place where you can be an enthusiast. So I got in about 8 years ago as an agent, sold insurance for a couple times. I was in the trenches talking with people, and then I joined the valuation team. And for about 6 years, I've been contributing to some of our research and to the price guide. And over the past couple years, I've taken over as an associate editor, and I do a lot of the production of our printed and our digital guide online.
When you say that, from the perspective of the magazine world that we live in, I find that it's like you went from being in the trenches, an insurance guy, shaking hands, kissing babies, writing policies, and now you're kind of like you're in more print. Is that? I mean, did you think like it's kind of weird to think that you went from there and then all the way now you're making a book, a magazine?
Yeah, it's. I never thought that I'd be there, but I've had great mentors. I've had some people that have just been in it for a long time. Dave Kinney, the founder of our price guide, has been just a great resource and has been with us every step of the way. He founded the guide back in 2006. And I've just had really good people behind me, and I found that it's something that I really like. I get a really good kick out of it.
How and why did you guys, and Dave, why did that valuation guide, why did Hagerty feel like you needed that?
Well, it's one of those things where, not getting too far into insurance, but we write a policy where we'll insure you for the market value of your car. And it's hard to tell the market value of your car without some sort of guide or resource. So Hagerty felt that it would be a good move to bring a price guide in-house. It helps us with showing what the market is. It helps our underwriters go, hey, these are what cars are selling for these days. And also, it's just good to show the people that, hey, we're in it. We know your car just as well as you do. Here's something that we can show you that just proves that we're as into it as you are.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You've got to be able to back it up. Before Hagerty created your valuation guide, what did they use?
As far as where did the data come from, or
the NADA, the Kelley Blue Book?
Oh yeah.
Do you still use those old school methods? And does yours supersede for Hagerty?
They used anything and everything that was available to them. NADA were possible, Kelley Blue Book. I mean, they're still great resources. Obviously, I'm a bit biased towards ours, just knowing all the work and the effort that goes into what we put into it, not diminishing those other guys, because I could tell you it's a lot of hard work. But nowadays we just feel like we're approaching it from a not only a data outlook, but from an enthusiast outlook. And I feel like we've got a really good finger on the pulse of what makes some of these vehicles important to our collectors and our audience versus some of these more some of the more used car approach, where it's just all about sales numbers and might not dig as far into the nuance of what makes a car worth what.
It's got to be the biggest gap out there that I see and you hear from everybody is, I've got to have insurance, A, to drive it, B, I've got to insure my collectible, my baby, whatever it is. And then you hear that people just don't understand. It's like, well, it's not just a piece of metal. This is what went into this. This is what I think it's worth. And then come into that term where that your guy has your back, and it's not just flood insurance. It's not, my house. This is my car, my truck, my passion. And that's probably, like you said, you're more than just an insurance company. You're a passionate enthusiast as well.
Yeah, exactly. And Hagerty's done a really good job of being more than just insurance. We're more of an automotive lifestyle brand at this point. I mean, you don't come to us just for insurance anymore. You come to us for articles about cars. You come to us for information, for valuation. I mean, insurance is almost secondary these days.
It's a great point. How did you guys go about creating that valuation back in the day, let's say, 5, 10, 15 years ago, compared to how you do it now with social media, auctions, just a plethora of information you have now?
Well, I mean, the information's always been there, but the auction thing really didn't explode until the mid 2000s, 2007, 2008. I mean, we all kind of paying a little bit of attention. Remember the muscle car boom back then, and Barrett Jackson getting on TV, and Mecum getting on TV, where that became really, really visual and out there. But auctions have been around for decades, and we've been tracking auctions we've had somebody tracking auctions in one way, shape, or form for decades, and we have data that stretches all the way back to the 80s as far as cars and what they've been selling for. But putting this together, we're going to look at what cars are selling for at auction. One advantage that we have these days versus back then is our team has somebody at every single auction, and we're looking at every car and determining, like, hey, this car's in perfect condition, and this one's a project over here, and this one is a driver. And we can go back after the sale is done and after we've recorded results and go, like, okay, crunch some numbers and say, hey, this is how this is how that sale compares to where we currently have values. Do we need to adjust up or down because we're seeing a bunch of cars selling more or less than where we post it? And we're also looking at what cars are listing for online. Now, granted, anybody can ask whatever they want, but there's you can draw some conclusions if everybody's coming, from the, around the same value range. And of course, there's always experts that we talk to.
What about like any type of bell curve where you see something just outsell? Two guys are going crazy on, a Blazer, a truck, a car, and you're like, nope, that's not, so do you throw out the highs and the lows and just kind of come to that meet?
Absolutely. I mean, we're definitely going to note them. We're going to pay attention to them, but we like to see a few sales in the same range in order for us to go, yeah, the market's moved. For instance, yesterday on Bring a Trailer, a late 70s Bronco sold for about 60 grand, which is way above where we've seen them sell for. We're definitely going to pay attention to that, and we're going to be looking for more second-gen Broncos to sell in that range before we move it. But it has our attention.
So I think you said late 60s. Did you mean late 70s?
Late 70s.
Okay, so the second gen, the 2-year 78, 79, those are killer for sure. Because the first gen Broncos, obviously, they move pretty good. We've seen that over the last few years. Do you and Dave like get together in the room and you're like, it sold exactly what we had it at? Yes, we're perfect. We know what we're good,
It's we really appreciate those. I mean, and when it gets down to the dollar, that's a really good feeling. But as long as we're close, we feel really good. But we also like to see. I appreciate seeing our values get broken. I like it when a few cars sell better than where we think the market is, because that tells us that people are interested and things are moving, and it just keeps things interesting when we go to update.
You brought up just now, and then obviously on your interview with Dave on your podcast that you guys did, you brought up Bring a Trailer, you brought up some of the different auctions. Are you guys really watching that now, especially with COVID? And, I think you guys mentioned it, but Bring a Trailer's numbers are way up, lot going on. Obviously, we saw Barrett's going to go, because we couldn't have, I think it was the Palm Springs auction. They went to an online auction as well. So you're seeing those auction companies really move to an online format.
Yeah, it's we're watching that pretty closely. I mean, it's Bring a Trailer's just killing it right now. We've noticed that people want to buy cars. They just need a way to do it. So even with COVID, even with the economic stress, we're finding that Bring a Trailer's killing it. We're talking with some dealers that specialize in collector vehicles. They're having best month ever right now, despite everybody staying at home and a lot of people drawing unemployment. There are people who are bored and they're buying cars, and it's crazy.
What about eBay? Do you base anything off of eBay?
eBay's great as well. I mean, we look at eBay. eBay's great for driver cars. I mean, if you want to buy a driver car at a good price, eBay's the way to go. The nice thing about Bring a Trailer compared to eBay, kind of draw a contrast, is they kind of curate their collection. They're not going to take just any K5 Blazer. They're going to take the K5 Blazer with 30,000 original miles, where eBay will take the one that's been driven 100,000 miles just as readily as they'll take the one with 15,000 miles. So, plus I think that and just depending on where you go, I think you've got different audiences. But we're essentially, if you're selling a car, we're going to try and pay attention to what's going on.
So, I mean, are you guys kind of like in a war room all day? Do you think about like the stock market guys and those brokers? Your team, are you just constantly looking at data, looking at numbers, trying to look at all the different sources to keep that thing fluid? And kind of a two-part question, I almost feel like your quarterly valuation guide that goes out, it's like it can change in a week.
Absolutely. I mean, it's we're constantly watching. We're really in some sort of production phase for several weeks before each guide goes out, and we, unfortunately, just because of the way things go with print, we have to have everything's finalized a month before everything goes live. So, Yeah, I mean, we can get caught behind the curve. I mean, anybody can get caught behind the curve when you have a publication date. But I mean, for the most part, we're constantly watching things, but we also have other things that we do. Like, I'm not constantly updating values. There's a little bit of a lull period. Right now, I'm looking at adding more things to our price guide. So we're upping our truck coverage. We are looking at just other collectors that are emerging that we haven't been able to add, and taking that time to add it. And then in a few more weeks, we're going to be right back at it, and it's going to be all price guide all the time.
Cool. Well, let's jump into the meat of it for us. Obviously, you mentioned it. You've got a square body blood in you. You've got some GMT 400, some OBS stuff there. Where do you see the trucks? Where do you see Chevy? Going back all the way to the C10s, and just kind of the market for Chevrolet trucks, C10 trucks, K10 trucks, Blazers, Suburbans, you name it. Our audience has it.
Yeah, I mean the trucks are just killing it in general right now. I think that the real bright spot right now is the K5s. First gens are right behind the first gen Broncos. I mean, the Broncos have been leading the headlines for a long time, and first gen Blazers are right up there with them now. And they're bringing prices that I never would have thought I'd seen 10 years ago. Square bodies are on the rise as well. In fact, I think that those have picked up a lot of attention in the past couple years. Personally, I'm a square body fan, so I'm happy to see that attention. But of course, I like to be able to buy them cheap too. So there's a little bit of back and forth there. I would say that the SUVs, like the Blazers and the Suburbans, those are the hot tickets right now. I'd say for the most part, square bodies are where things are at. I mean, the 67 through 72, those pickups and Blazers, Suburbans have gotten attention for a while, but all of a sudden, your square bodies, especially your 80 square bodies, have really started to gain a lot of popularity. I think it comes down to there's a lot of younger buyers out there, and they're affordable, and they're trucks that they saw as kids, and they want them. I mean, for the most part, square bodies are being bought by Gen Xers and millennials, we're finding.
I think I'm a Gen Xer, I think. But yeah, that's it, right? I mean, the 67 to 72, and then you think about 69 to 72, the Blazers, obviously they are still very popular. They're the pinnacle. We think about the C10s and the trucks. It's still those guys that are 50s, 60s, maybe 70s are buying that at the auction. But the square body stuff is really coming up, from what I see and what I watch. So I'm just kind of wondering, it's almost like the value has a higher percentage yield if you think about a square, because you can get into it cheaper than the second gen 69, 72 style Blazers or 67. So you can get into those Blazers, and they're out there, and there's a shit ton of them out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, and parts are accessible and available, and more. That's the one thing our community is really lucky. We can get so much aftermarket.
Absolutely. I think that's a great selling point for them. There's everybody and their brother's got some sort of aftermarket line or some sort of restoration line for a square body right now, and they're not that hard to work on. I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5", and I can crawl right into the engine bay and work on the engine of one of those things. And with a little bit of mechanical skill, you can make one run really well. So they're just great all around trucks. I mean, there's a good reason why they're my favorite generation.
That's cool. Yeah, totally. Now, what do you think about this? Okay, so they're not that many out there, but there's some rare birds. Do you ever see any crossover to the truck market with a special, distinct, low number paint? Whether that's the first gen 60 to 66, there's really not that much out there that's super rare. Big back window, but that's kind of going by the wayside now because there's companies out there that are repopping the inner. Second gen, you've got some decal stuff. You've got really, other than that, low number Blazers. I don't know. I'm trying to think what else. And then the square bodies, they got some unique stuff. GMC's done, the Gentleman Jims, the Bo James. I have what's called an impact truck, which is just a decal that's original from mine's a 76. So when you look at that market, do people care about that? Does that really hold value like a Camaro or Corvette, something that has the right motor?
I think that I think the right engine helps. I think that if you've got an original big block truck versus a 350 truck, I mean, you're going to go for the 454 every time if you can get it. But honestly, I haven't noticed a big impact on the special edition packages, but I don't think that's going to last long. I think that somebody is going to come across an Indy hauler and go, what the heck is that? That is the coolest thing ever, and it's going to catch on, or a Desert Fox, or something. I think that those are going to be. I think they're going to become cooler and cooler, and I think it's just a matter of time before there's some distinction there. But I think at this point, anybody and everybody who has a mild interest in these trucks is just buying them up, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, and if they find something that's a rare bird or stumble across something. Now, what about, because they were so readily available, people switching things out? So, for example, a long bed is cut down to a short bed. A new LS is put in there. The interior has been completely redone. Does that just really diminish the value of the vehicle?
I think it depends on who's doing the job. So I think that if it was me with a Sawzall in my garage, it probably is going to hurt the value. But if you got a really good custom shop working at it, I think that it's going to increase the value. That's the one thing about trucks that we've started to notice a trend with, is that really good custom trucks will bring vastly more money than what a stock example will. Almost to the point where you might even get every penny you put into it, which is a rare occurrence. I mean, anybody who plays with vehicles knows that if you get 50 cents on the dollar, you're doing really good. But
yeah, that's one of my questions. You're reading my mind, because I feel like that. I kind of had a question that I'm like, well, should I jump into that? So let's just do that. Let's jump into that. So
yeah.
How do you work through that? I mean, a lot of truck guys will spend, for example, they might be $100K into a really nice truck. Truck is valued at $70K by an appraiser, by somebody, by insurance or whatever, or higher, and then it goes for 65 at auction. And you're like, well, how do I balance that variance of 100K labor, 85 to 110 an hour at the shop, at Greg's Customs, and then are you kidding me? This thing only came back and it's only worth this much. And we see that a lot in the C10 community, because so many C10s, so many shops, and I mean generically, when I say C10, I'm meaning the whole, Blazers, Suburbans, everything, K10s, and there's some discrepancy there.
It's just like any segment. A lot of your money that you put into it's labor. If you can do the labor yourself, you're going to save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of money. But the next guy is probably not going to pay for your labor, and it's cold, but that's just the way the world works these days. But when it comes to value, each customized vehicle is unique in its own, and it's got value on its own. And you really can't compare it to the next vehicle, and it's just going to come down to what's your value, what do you feel, what do you have into it, and what does the guy holding the money think that it is, and how where in between can you meet, or can you get him over to your side, or does he have to convince you over to his side? So it's really tough to pin down a market value on that sort of stuff, because everything is so unique. That's why we only do stock vehicles on our guide, because I can't look at Joe's truck over here that he spent a bunch of money on and tell him that, oh no, you spent $100,000, but because of this, and this, it's only worth 50. Joe knows his truck better than I do, and you know, determining his value is going to really come down to when he goes to sell it and what the next guy is going to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, I brought it up too, and you've probably heard it, but something's only worth what you can get somebody else to pay for it at the time. So that's what's great
Absolutely.
about auctions, because we see two guys, plus going at it, and it just takes that second guy, or if you're lucky, the third guy, and they kind of go, back and forth. What about how does that? So staying with the valuation, then jumping over to insurance. Mm-hmm. What happens when the guy's like, I got to get this thing insured for $100K? And you're like, there's no value there. I can't get behind that.
Well, I mean, if now, granted, I'm not an underwriter, and each and they're going to look at other factors beyond, say, just the value into it. They're going to look at the amount of risk somebody presents, but they're going to. If you put $100,000 into your truck and you've got all these receipts, they're much more willing to, help you sift through those receipts and go, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from, and then kind of work with what a realistic value is versus, hey, I spent $50,000 on a $100,000 truck. Well, if it gets lost, you're only out $50,000, and you just have to have that conversation there of does it make sense to offer more, or does it make sense to offer what you paid for it? And that's kind of a back and forth conversation that somebody in an underwriting position would have.
Sure, yeah, and I'm sure that can be difficult if it's not essentially the same, synonymous mm-hmm. between the guy that's looking for the insurance and the underwriter and the company, because it's like, hey, buddy, I can only give you or value it this much. And I feel like the C10 market continues to kind of climb. So you might mm-hmm. want to get back with your underwriter and say, hey, I'm only at this. I think we take that for granted too. We're like, oh yeah, I got insured for $25K. Like, dude, that truck might be worth 35 plus now, mm-hmm. and then they don't want to, I know guys, right? I'm a guy. I understand.
Yeah.
Guys are like, well, I don't want to pay that extra money, but I definitely need that coverage if, something was to happen.
It's a question of how much can you afford to lose.
Yeah, there you go. There's another bumper sticker. So you kind of alluded to it earlier about just the stock, the OG classic style in your valuation. Yeah. What do you think about if a guy's got a truck that's super stock and he's like, mm-hmm. man, I want to do a C notch, I want to lower it, I want to do this, but now the trucks are getting so kind of rare. I mean, mm-hmm. unmolested, if you will, and it's almost like I'm just going to leave this truck the way it is because there's so many of them, like slammed and bagged and notched and framed. It's like I'm kind of holding on to a little thing here. I'm just going to leave this. How are you seeing that market from an OG classic style perspective?
I mean, we're seeing more and more people leave their vehicles alone, where even just a handful of years ago, doesn't matter what the condition was. Hey, a rust-free truck is a lot easier to modify because I don't have to fix the rust, right? So if you pay attention to, bring a trailer in some of the auctions and you've got these low-mile trucks coming, a lot more people are just leaving them the heck alone, which, from a perspective of if you're a customizer, that kind of sucks because you have that internal conflict of, do I molest this thing or do I stay true to what it is? I mean, me personally, I'm more of the type of person that, hey, if it's really, really great and nothing's wrong with it, then probably leave it alone. But hey, if you got to go in there and do some stuff and customize it to your liking, probably better on a truck that already needs a little bit of work, and you're not really erasing that originality because it's already gone. A good example is my father's got a 78 C20 Camper Special that's original and really, really good condition. And he's going through the dilemma of, the engine probably needs to be gone through and be regasketed. And yeah, those 78 454s really aren't that powerful, but hey, it's still a 454. It's an original big block truck. Do I go in there and build a 496 stroker and do a bunch of stuff that you can do some serious hauling and put a camper on the back and have it not bog you down when you're going up some hills? Or do I just leave it alone because it's such an original and such a nice truck?
Yeah, that's the dilemma, is whether or not. And I think too, a lot of trucks you can just put a little 4.6 drop on it. You're not really taking away from the heritage. I guess
Yeah.
it just comes down to the guy buying it or whether or not. Because I feel like we have changed those trucks so much that kind of the idea of those trucks when you see them, if they're not maybe instead of a 4.6, maybe say like a 3.5, where you just take
Hmm.
a little bit out of it, you're like, well, that's almost become the norm now. We've kind of we
Yeah.
set that bar.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that anything you can unbolt and reverse in a weekend it's pretty safe. If you want to add a little bit of lift or give it a little bit of a drop, that's something you can revert in a weekend before you sell it. Those are some pretty safe modifications, and you can still make the vehicle your own.
Yeah, good point. I still see that the K10 stuff does a little bit better on your valuation. I went through and kind of priced out some stuff, some
Yeah.
first gen, some second gen squares, even all the way up, second gen square or fourth gen, however you want to look at it, square
Hmm.
headlight stuff. K10 stuff tends to do a little bit better. You have that price a little higher.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially with the earlier stuff. Four-wheel drive is just kind of an oddity in the '60s and early '70s, and as you get kind of later on, then I think it starts to even out, and that's probably something where we need to massage it a little bit because I think that the given how people look at the C10 for the customize, how you can customize it, that's got some really attractive features where a K10 you can't necessarily do that as easily. So at least in our region where I'm from, we've got harsh winters and a lot of two tracking opportunities. There's definitely a bit of a perceived premium on a K series versus a C series, and some of that might carry over where down south that where it's less of a factor having four-wheel drive. So I think everything's kind of regional as well.
Yeah, great point. I do see it here in the auctions. Like if I go to Barrett, K10s or Blazers, whatever, anything with four-wheel drive does seem to do better. I wonder kind of if that's the age of the audience, like you brought up, that might be a little bit that the numbers are a little less in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes that almost rare. But when you think about two-wheel drive Blazer numbers, those are real low as well. So when you think about
Yeah.
the Bourbons and the trucks, there's plenty of two-wheel drive options. Blazers not so much. SUV, they made it, four-wheel drive. So some guys convert them, and some guys find those OG classics.
Yeah, and the Blazer's a really good example to kind of come back to here. I mean, it's a vehicle that is kind of seen as a four-wheel drive vehicle. So I think you've got those guys that really love the two-wheel drive look, but I think the majority of people place a high premium on a four-wheel drive just because that's what a Blazer is to most people.
Yeah, when you see a two-wheel drive Blazer, especially a first gen, you're like, is that original? Is that something? Because they just made
Yeah.
low numbers of them, so they are rare. But again, people come back and they might even convert it. What does that do? I know we've kind of talked about it, but like a conversion, something that big where something was four-wheel drive, they took it down, or something was two-wheel drive and they took it up.
I think that that's an interesting thought. I mean, it could go either way. I mean, if you take a four-wheel drive to two-wheel drive, there's a good chance that it's going to be highly customized. I don't think I've seen any conversions that weren't. So, if anything, you're probably not hurting the value all that much because you're putting so much work and so much customization into it already. Taking two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive, again, that might not hurt the value too much because, like I said, you've got those people that place a value on a four-wheel drive. Now, it might not be worth real four-wheel drive money, especially if you have one restored to perfect. Maybe the market won't bear those top-end prices, but it's got to be worth more than a two-wheel drive to the vast majority.
Yeah, that's cool. I just feel like, people have almost accepted that these are somewhat kind of Jenga Tetris where we can do all this different stuff, and okay, well, maybe it's not really a K VIN, it's a C VIN, but as long as you document it, and like you said, you have it done by the right shop, and it's not, Greg and Ronnie in the garage just saws on away, then you're probably going to get your value there. If you're going to an auction or something like that versus, from a valuation perspective. What about paint? And the big question for us, and it's been this way for nearly 15 years, 10 years solid, is really patina, original paint patina. Does that get any due? Does that get the respect that it, in my mind, deserves?
I think it's all in the eye of the beholder. I think that there's a growing group of enthusiasts that really like the patina, and as long as it hasn't been neglected and it's mechanically sound, and all you got to do is jump in and drive it, there's a lot of people out there, and I think it's a growing group that really appreciates patina. And then you still have the group that needs everything to be perfect. So I think it's really, I think it varies on the individual. I think that there are people that place a bit of value on legitimate, honest patina versus being perfect, and those that don't value it at all.
And I wonder, because you're seeing so much, you have a truck history, but that's the thing where I think in the car world, I don't know that patina quite is still to the level that it is in the truck world, because those cars are probably getting painted. But
yeah,
for us, Arizona, Michigan, I always look at and say, okay, that's been painted, maybe just in a certain area. What are you hiding underneath there? Whereas that virgin paint, where it's like, hey, this is original paint. And rockers, give me a break. I've got an original Arizona truck. I'm the second owner, bought from the original owner. I doubt the truck even left Arizona. Both rockers are just shot. It's not something where, on a second gen C10, but I could see where, okay, rockers have been replaced. You've done your due diligence. You've done your documentation. It wasn't Ronnie and and Greg's Customs. Maybe we could, rockers, but yeah, it's documented and it's original paint, minus this or so on and so forth. So I guess, not to go too much on a tangent on paint versus patina, but I feel like there's so much value in patina in that there's nothing hiding. But then paint is so damn expensive. So it's like, I don't care what I'm hiding. I just dropped 20 grand on a freaking high-end paint job. This is what I was hiding, and this is what I fixed.
Yeah, I think that you make some really good points there. And, I think that an honest truck that doesn't need a thing, but, might have some faded paint, maybe a little bit of surface rust here and there, just to add some flavor. There are guys that are probably going to pay a little bit more for that than a bad paint job. Versus there's still going to be the guy out there that says this truck looks like a piece of garbage and I need to put a $10,000 paint job in it.
How much should somebody be looking at their valuation? So a buddy of mine has a kind of a dealership. He sends me some trucks the other day. He says, "Oh, what do you think about these?" One of the trucks he sends me, outdated. It looked like a really nice 06 at best restoration. A lot of chrome, a lot of really cool paint, and some striping, and I'm like, dude, that truck C10 was probably 60 grand at some point. Now I look at that truck and it's 35 on a good day.
Yeah.
So how does that factor in? And, we're moving at the speed of light. So it's like, hey, things change, taste change, but you got to find that right guy to buy that, yet the value is just not there.
Yeah. I think that anything that's very indicative of an era. So, I mean, anything that looks like they ordered everything out of the Summit or J.C. Whitney catalog in 2006 is probably going to be worth less now than what it was back then. I would say that anybody considering customizations, I mean, it's fine to go with with the flavor of the day if that's what you're into. But if you're looking for longevity, the more subtle and the more thoughtful things that you can do, the things where you look at the vehicle and go like, hey, that was really neat, I didn't think of that, or that was a really cool twist on what stock. I think that's really where it's at, and I think that's going to have a lot more staying power than just going with everything that's in the current magazine. Magazine cover trucks.
What's crazy, is the GMTs and the OBS stuff is that stuff we're seeing. If guys parked that, I just did a post the other day. A guy had a truck completely outdated, but we're kind of coming back full circle. Kind of had some extreme paint. And what he did is he took some old 15 welds and he put some new 20 billet specialties on it. I don't think he changed the stance. I don't think he needed to, because I think he filled up his wheel well just fine. But I feel like we're almost to the point where that truck, 10 years, hot truck. 10 years, not so hot. Now, oh, damn, he left it alone. He's coming back. Guys that are our age are seeing that and being like, that was a good time. That was a great time. I need to get a hold of that. And that movement is definitely growing some legs.
Oh, absolutely. I think the GMTs are the next thing, both stock and customized. I've been looking at those pretty closely. I've owned a couple GMT style full size Blazers, and like, I would give a right arm to have another one in really, really good shape again. But those things have gone up in value a lot. I think the last one I bought, I paid $3,500. Yeah. I couldn't touch a nice one for that anymore. So those are hot. If any of your audience that has one in good shape, I'd hang on to it.
Hang on to it or ask a lot for it. Either way, one or the other.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, some of the custom stuff, some of that might, some of that is coming around. I mean, there's some nostalgia in there of like, hey, that's what I remember in high school. That's so cool. I'd say GMTs are where things are going to be at soon.
Yeah, kind of following suit with the square bodies where they got really popular. What do you think about the next, almost completely off all of this is just the movement of, GM trucks, Chevy, GMC. We see the kind of the evolution and the OBS CK GMT 400s. Do you think it'll stop there? Do you think it'll go to the 99s? Do you think that there's really a market for the 99? And they could have said that after, they could have, if there was a podcast 10 years ago, they could have said square bodies it's going to stop. But I wonder if it's going to stop, because you look at the NBS, and I mean, they're cool. I drive a daily NBS, but I just wonder what your thoughts are from more of a enthusiast.
I think that I don't think it's going to stop. I think that it's going to take some time, because, 6-8 years ago, I looked back at GMTs going like, that's going to be collectible? Okay. I mean, they're great drivers. They're reliable. They're tough trucks, but collectible? Okay. I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. And I think that the next gen is, I think that there will come a day where we're going to look back and go, man, those are cooler than I remember them. So, I daily an 03, and it's a great truck. It's not in collectible shape, but I think that if you find the right example, the right configuration that's been kept up really well, I think it could do well. Good example is, how many 8.1 HDs were made. I think that a really, really clean 8.1 HD, somebody is going to go nuts over. I own an 8.1 HD, but it's got 1 million miles on it. But so that one's not going to be collectible. But when that thing finally dies, who knows when? And I look back and go, hey, that'd be nice to have another one. I think I'm going to look at it and go, yeah, I can't afford that, or that's not what I'm willing to pay for it. I think that there's going to come a day with that series that we're going to look at it and go, that was way cooler than we gave it credit for now.
And I think the money, drives it. Because if the square bodies get to be too much and the OBSs get to be too much, then they're like, all right, what's next? Hey, these NBSs are pretty rad. And the cool thing about an NBS, honestly, I kind of joke around sometimes with my buddies, is like, Guess what, guys? It comes with an LS already installed.
Yeah. And hey, the LBZ Duramax is the one that everybody wants to modify. Hey, guess what? They got them stock. So
Yeah, that's my daily. So I don't plan on selling it right now. So I think I'll keep it. Okay, so what else are you guys seeing out there? You and Dave talked a little bit about some cars, some Volvos. I thought that was funny.
yeah.
So what else are you seeing out there that you're like, oh damn, I didn't think that, like an OBS or an MBS, I didn't think that the Volvo wagons would be popular, but here comes these millennials, and these old teachers were driving these things around. They're low miles, they're out
Mhm.
there. What else are you guys seeing that's blowing your mind, or you're like, oh, that wasn't really on my radar?
I mean, honestly, coming from somebody who was raised in a kind of a muscle car loving household, uh, some of those hot Civics from the late '90s and early 2000s, those are blowing my mind. They are going nuts, and people love them. I mean, there's currently on Brand Trailer. There's I think it's a '99 or a 2000 Civic Si that a few days ago, with many days left to go, they were up to 27 grand.
Wow,
Yeah. So
that's a lot.
those are kind of blowing my mind right now. Yeah, CRXs, those things are just going nuts.
Is it because the little, the rice burner, evolution of, just the way that those guys would, that kind of that base is just loving those cars? Is that kind of what it is?
Absolutely. There's a few guys in the office here that have always been into Hondas, and they're looking at those things going, man, I always wanted that car, but I couldn't afford it, so I took a Civic DX and I put the can on it and I modified it or whatever, and or I swapped in a engine with VTEC and kind of made it my own SI. I think it's those guys looking at those going like, this is the car I always wanted. I have the money. I'm going to pull the trigger.
It's almost like you just have to go back and look at like every 3 years of high school and say, okay, what did the kids want? What did the cool kids have? And then, kind of keep that sequence going, because who would have thought that those little Hondas would bring that kind of money? And, we have Fast and Furious and we have all that culture, but that's cool, because I think even as a truck guy, we kind of like make fun. But to me, if a guy's working on something and he or she really, because I will say there's a lot of girls in that, I feel like in that kind of community. I just think it's awesome to keep those wheels turning and keep everything going and the automotive culture alive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think you're right that we need to take a look back and look at what was cool a few years ago and fell out of favor, and I think people are starting to take a look again. I just a few years ago, the fourth gen Firebirds were kind of, well, that's kind of the weird, hard to work on, rotten cars, and now people are looking at like, hey, a Camaro SS, SLP, that's pretty cool, or a Pontiac Firehawk, that's awesome, or WS6. Yeah, I think that every car comes around eventually.
Fourth gen, but third gen, yeah. What are you seeing with the third gen Camaros and the Firebirds and everything? What are you seeing out there with that?
There's a lot of steady interest. I've got a couple friends that have some third gens, and they're great cars, and they're just grinning ear to ear, because it just seems like every time they turn around, there's another one that's listed, or there's another one that's sold that's in reasonable shape, that's selling for more than what they paid for it a few years back. So, really, really, really good examples with no miles, which of course are few and far between. Those things are hot items, but there's still there's still quite a few that have been rode hard, put away wet, and are beaten to the ground, and they're still bringing money that they did 5 years ago.
Yeah, and those cars, I mean, they're super cool, but that's where you start to see that evolution of the plastic front end, and that's where the fourth gen, I mean, it became a really big, a lot of plastic. That look hasn't got to me yet, and that is really right in my genre of high school. But I guess I kind of like the older style because the older cool kids had the third gen. But I did see some real nice third gens at Barrett this year. And yeah, it kind of gets your heart pumping a little bit. You look inside there and the T-tops and the interior. So it's cool. I guess the recipe's out there. You know, it's not rocket science. Like, if it was cool then, it's going to be cool. If it's in good shape, it's going to be worth money. If it wasn't, rode hard, put away, wet, abused, if grandma had it or somebody took care of it or a shop came through and really went through it right, then, you know, odds are you're going to have some value there. You know, for me and my audience, I just try to tell guys, just enjoy the hell out of it. And, you know, that's what it's all about. But obviously for your audience, you probably get a lot of people who they might not even turn a wheel. They just, you know, very low mile enthusiasts. They like to collect.
Yes. There's a lot of people out there that like to collect. They'll find the lowest mileage and the most exclusive car that they can of whatever genre, you know, floats your boat. But and there's still quite a few people out there that like to drive, and I have a lot of respect for that. I think that cars should be driven. But yeah, there are people out there that have the space and the means to store it and to maintain it. That you know, that's what they want to do. And I mean, if that's your thing, more power to you. I like to drive.
If a guy says, "Hey, I got this truck. I won best of show here. I won, you know, I was on the cover of this magazine. I won this. I won that." Does that matter much for the valuation?
Yeah, I would say that you know, if you won this show or you're on the cover of this magazine, you know, I think that sets it apart from everything else. That you know, it sets it apart from every other custom truck or every other, you know, really, really nice truck. You know, it gains a little bit more cred to it. Yeah.
So I almost think you could have a subsection, not necessarily just for trucks, but what about chassis? And, you know, we have all these companies out there making really amazing high-end chassis. Obviously, the Roadster Shop is an easy, you know, platform. Yeah. In the truck world, we have multiple different companies out there. Does it matter what company from a valuation perspective do you think? And does that change the value of a vehicle when you're like, hey, it has, you know, it's on a brand new Roadster Shop chassis versus a stock chassis?
Yeah, I think that it all kind of ties into how far you went with the build in general. I mean, if you're willing to drop the money on a Roadster Shop chassis, there's a good chance you dropped way more money than that on the rest of the truck. And I think that it just kind of ties everything together. I think that it shows that you're really committed to, you know, the best of the best when it comes to customizing it. And I think that does help, and I think it helps build the portfolio.
Cool. Yeah, it's tough out there, you know, but guys are a lot of companies. I just wondered if you know, you're like, oh, well, that's a very reputable company, that matters more versus not. But I mean, we have some really nice companies out there in our kind of community, and I'm sure even in, you know, well, really all communities. I mean, you look at like Total Cost Involved, you looked at you know, all the way through all the hot rod industry, and you know, the ebb and flows. And you look at some of it kind of brings me back to, you know, the point of, we have these eras. You think of the hot rod era, you think of the Camaro era, and now we're in the C10 era. And I feel like, you know, would you compare it from your perspective that the truck community is at an all-time high and really has ceded its place or claimed its place in history when it comes back to automotive culture of hot rods? I guess I skipped muscle cars. You know, well, I said Camaros, but hot rods, muscle cars. I don't know. Is it trucks? Is that next? I'm not saying it is. I just wonder.
I think if we're not there already, which I think we are, I think we're darn close. I think that in the past 5 years, trucks have just kind of come out of nowhere for the collector who hasn't been paying attention. And it's become the next cool thing where, you know, guys like you and me have always known that, you know, these old trucks are really, really cool. But yeah, I think that trucks are here, and I don't think they're going anywhere.
Well, and you look at the manufacturers, they're you know, wiping cars from their plate, and they're just building SUVs and trucks. And we get the ability to do that, which is so cool in the Chevrolet, you know, C10 world, and we're in, because we could pretty much build a brand new truck. You know, I was a guy came by yesterday to look at some dogs of all things, and he's looking at a picture, And I said, you pretty much can make a brand new truck out of an old truck. You're probably just going to be missing airbags. But you can really, when you think about a chassis, you think about a motor, drivetrain, and all the new things that you can get, fortunately for my audience in the C10 community, but we can get just about anything. And you're making a really cool vehicle, a rad-ass truck that's probably going to hold value for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that right now trucks are among the safest bet as far as just getting into something and not losing your shirt.
Cool. All right. So I've got that. You kind of said, what's next in the evolution, and we're probably right there. A few insurance questions. Okay, what happens if a guy wrecks a vehicle and he's got insured? Do you guys allow them to buy it back? I know, like a normal vehicle, okay, Todd, totaled his truck, and he can buy it back. So is that something that you see, customers doing?
Oh yeah. I mean, we do have the ability to allow for that. Granted, I'm not a claims specialist, but we do find there's a lot of people that choose to keep their vehicle and fix it up, and it versus letting us take it off their hands and do whatever with it. There's a lot of people that prefer to keep them.
Okay, I did have some valuations, not evaluation. I was going to go over here. So and just for my audience, I mean, this is just kind of generic information. I think the most important thing is for my audience, you can go online. It's free. You just got to sign up. So you can go into Hagerty, and they've got a complete and total valuation thing there. So just no different than really Kelley Blue Book. Well, and hopefully that doesn't mean I'm not discrediting Hagerty's thing, comparing it to KBB, but that's the old school for me. That was always, that or NADA. So you've got that availability. The biggest thing was, though, you're not just you got to look at the 4 phases. You kind of want to describe that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, we rate everything from a grade 1 to a grade 4. Now, the industry standard even goes further than that, but for our purposes, we just focus on 1 through 4. A number 1 is going to be best in the world. Think of showroom fresh with no miles on it, never been driven down a dirt road, barely has anything on the odometer. That's a number 1. That sort of truck is probably less than 0.1% of what's out there. It's so far above what you and I normally see that it's almost unobtainium. Number 2 is a really, really nice truck. It might be a recent restoration, or it might be just a good, sparingly driven vehicle. It's going to have lower miles than average, or it's just going to be really, really well kept up. Average guy who likes vehicles they're going to look at it and say, hey, this thing is perfect. I can't find anything wrong with it. Number 3 is what most of the driver quality vehicles are. There might be a few things that if you look closely, you'll pick up on it. Maybe a little bit of surface rust starting in a couple spots on the chassis, or maybe a little bit of dirt here and there. It'll show a little bit of wear, but it's going to look pretty good still. Number 4 is when we start getting into, even the non-enthusiast can look at it and go, yeah, that's been used. There's pop the hood, it's going to be a bit grimy and oily. There might be some dust and dirt all around. The interior is going to show some noticeable wear, maybe some cracks in the dash here and there, but it's not going to be a piece of junk. Then once you start getting into the industry standard goes into a 5 and a 6, that's when you get into, hey, I got to restore this truck, all the way to it's not worth my time and effort, and I might as well part it out and put it into something nicer.
Yeah, I think that probably ends up being where guys think they might be a higher number than they really are. And you're like, yeah, maybe not. So most guys are probably going to be a 3, 4, maybe a few 2s out there, probably not a lot of 1s. So kind of him letting, Greg break that down. Some of the numbers I got, 72s were about, just saying a C10, 38, close to 40 for a number 1. 27, close to 30 for 2, 16K for your 3s, and just about 10K for your 4s. And then the K10s were a little bit more, about 5,000 to 10,000 more, depending. 73s, same, really a little bit less than the 2s. I just kind of went with, that different genre there. I did pull up 73, some Blazers, 47,000 for number 1. So again, that's number 1. 34, 18, and 12. And then bump into 77s. You had, really about the same. There wasn't quite a big difference or variance between a 3 and a 7, 73 and 77 for my audience. The biggest thing I thought was weird there is the full top Blazers tend to be a lot more popular. So your 69 through your 75, and it didn't show up there. That's probably not going to be realistic in a true sell. So do you ever come across something like that where, not specifically to Blazers and full tops, but something where you're like, well, a car has a T-top. The saying there is the price goes down, or the top goes down, the price goes up. Do you see a lot of that?
Yeah, I mean, we find that just in general, full removable tops tend to draw a few more people. That goes along with Broncos. Early Broncos with the full removable tops tend to be a little bit more valuable versus the semi-removables, and some of the forerunners, the earlier ones where you can remove the top versus the later ones. Those tend to carry a little bit more value. But I think it just depends on who you're looking at. An early Blazer with a full removable top is a lot harder to find than a later one with the back half that comes off. So I think it all evens out in the end. Although I do think that there's going to be a bit of a shift in the within these segments. So I mean, we've got the round headlight square bodies and the square headlight square bodies, and there's a bit of a difference there, and I think that those nuances are starting to show themselves a little bit.
You brought up a Toyota, man. Oh, what a rad truck, and the Forerunners. How do you see those guys doing?
Oh man, they're killing it. The early Forerunners are just hot, and we're finding that especially amongst like millennials, that seems to be like the truck right now. And kind of the 22RE powered ones, not the V6 powered ones. Those are the hot commodity right now. So we're keeping a close eye on those too.
I Timex, you take a lick in and keep on ticking. Those 22REs, those motors. I've got a couple guys at work that are real hunters, and they want the extra cab, short bed for the wheelbase. They're just going through motors like crazy because they just, they find them, they rebuild them, they put them in there. Another thing that I see a lot that's very unique, I've got to believe in my, segment of where we're at in Arizona, is you'll see those, and I don't know the rules, but you'll see a guy with a Toyota, probably, I'm going to say a third-gen truck, pulling a second-gen Toyota on its way to Mexico. And you will see caravans of those. I'm talking 6, 7 guys loaded to the hilt, driving Toyotas, pulling Toyotas. And I think it's something with the parts where they can't get the parts or something like that. So they will be constantly driving. I guarantee you I can go out to I-10 in the next 2 days, and I will see, if not 1, 2 of those caravans going to, before COVID. Let's say, I don't know now if there's anything in COVID, but before COVID, and when we go to eastbound and down to the throwdown, we're on the 10, and we drive all the way, to the 10 for a long time, all the way to San Antonio, really. We will see so many of those caravans. It's literally not anything you'll kind of go, what the hell is that? Now it's accepted. You're like, and if a guy comes out from like Indiana or something like that that's riding with us, they're like, what the hell is that? And then when we go to fuel up, you'll see them like literally 6, 7 of them all kind of together, and that's what they do, man. So those Toyotas, they're very popular south of the border, I can tell you that, and they're tremendously popular here too.
Yeah, Midwest. I haven't seen a really nice, stock, local '80s Toyota since I was a kid. I mean, because we salt the roads so much that they just disintegrated. So, Midwest, yeah, send them up here, because we love them up here, but we can't find them in good shape. We have to come down to your area to find them.
Stay away. I do like that I do like that there's so much cool stuff out there, that everybody isn't just buying up C10s, because it's like, hey, there's so many cool things. Another market, what are you guys seeing in the Jeep market? Whether that's CJ 5s, 7s, 8s, Wagoneers, Scramblers, even the XJs seem to do really well. The XJs are crazy.
Yeah.
How much they, I used to look at them for about $4,000, and now it's got 50,000 more miles than it did when it was at $4,000, and it's worth $9,000. And you're like, how the hell does that thing keep going up?
I don't know. I mean, just like 4Runners up here, a good XJ is hard to find, and when you find them, people want a premium for them. But yeah, the XJs are going nuts. The TJ Wranglers are starting to go nuts. Like, they're seriously good Wranglers, and people are starting to recognize that. And just Jeeps in general are really good, but I think that there's starting to become a shift in some of the newer stuff. Before they went to the Pentastar, it seems like if it's got a 4-liter, people are buying it right now.
Oh yeah, they'll last forever. So see, what I'm doing here is I'm just deferring people to make sure that they look at other stuff, not just at C10.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you, if I said, okay, Greg, you've got $50K, what are you going to do with it? What are you buying? What are you building? If you could buy 3 cars and build them little by little, if you could build one, where are you at with that? What's your fave?
Honestly, I'd go straight for a K5. Honestly, I mean, like my background shows, I love the Chalet. Those things I think are the coolest thing ever. Now, granted, if you can find one, but yeah, if I had that sort of money, I'd get my hands on a good 70s square body K5, because that's my thing. I really like the round headlight trucks. Little bit of money left over, might try and get my hands on I like the 6970 C10s. I like that, the way they did the grill on that. If I had a little bit of money left over, I'd get just a decent driver, one of those.
Cool. Yeah, you're definitely the right guy we need to be talking to. So it works out that we got you on here. I know a guy who's hoarding chalets, so we can make that happen.
Okay.
For sure. And you can still find them. The problem here, like in Arizona at least, I would say I probably see maybe 3 a year come through that when I'm kind of looking. The problem is the interiors are really tough. And if you find a good one, I mean, I've seen them right around 14 to 16K. I have seen them as cheap as, well, there was a GMC, which is going to be your Casa Grande, the big house. Now this is a few years ago. I think the guy was asking like $4,000 to $6,000 for it, and it wasn't. It just didn't have the right hood, and that was a little bit frustrating. Although it was green, and I thought it was kind of cool because I was like, well, it just matches.
That is.
But the interiors just get really roached. So unless you are really wanting to spend a lot of time on redoing that interior, now I find it funny that you like a chalet because I'm 6'1" and I can barely fit in that son of a bitch. So I can't even imagine a guy who's 6'5" sitting in one of those things or even maneuvering. But the concept is really cool.
I'm used to it. There are very few older RVs that I can stand up straight in. So yeah, that's an accepted thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, for insurance, what are you requiring to, like, low jack is one of the things. Is that still something that our guys should be considering? Is there new technology out there that, a guy says, hey, listen, I've got, and then is there a value that you know of? So it's like, hey, if a vehicle's worth 25 or more, we require this, and this, or are there kind of some steps there that our audience needs to be thinking about?
With stuff like low jack or any sort of tracking device, it's really something that we like to see on more higher risk type vehicles, risk of theft. for the most part, that's not a big concern for us, seeing tracking. I don't know enough to say whether or not we offer any sort of breaks on that sort of thing, but for the most part, we're more concerned about, how are you using it? I mean, we're probably not going to have much of a conversation around, the your wood hauler, or in the Midwest, everybody's old truck's beat up and it's a wood hauler or a plow truck. We're probably not going to look at that, but hey, if you got a really nice example or a really customized one, hey, as long as you're using it like a collectible, we want to talk.
And I don't know how is it back there for Arizona. We have emissions in Phoenix, in the Maricopa metro area. So a way that we don't have to have emissions is as long as we prove that we have collector car insurance. Some people get that misconstrued with the plate. So you can get a cool Arizona collector plate, but that has no, bearing or variance on your insurance. So do you guys see that across the states that, hey, you don't have to have a vehicle emissions as long as you have classic car insurance, insinuating, I'm assuming, that you're not going to drive the shit out of the thing?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons why they require that, is because our requirements are, hey, you got to have a daily driver, and this has to be kind of your cool once in a while vehicle. But I recall when I was in sales that we did have quite a few people from Arizona that, if they felt like, hey, my vehicle's collectible, hey, give Hagerty a call because I don't have to do emissions anymore.
Yeah, that's a pain. It's a pain here. It's so frustrating. So for sure, that's a way guys will do that if they can get approval for a collector car insurance. So I'd like to hear from my listeners. If you guys are out there, let me know what you're seeing in your state. Shoot me an email. You know how to get a hold of me, Ronnie at C10 Talk. I'm going to let you go here. Do you see that the OBS stuff is collectible? Are we to that point yet where the 88 to 98 stuff is getting into that? Because I think the value is going to be the big discrepancy there, where a guy is saying, that a year ago, let's just say a year ago, those trucks weren't really quite on the map yet. We saw about 5 or 6 of them at SEMA this year. I saw about 5 of them at Barrett this year. So you're starting to see where those trucks are getting to that value point. Are you guys considering them a collectible?
Oh yeah, absolutely. To the point where watch our website soon. We should have some values up in the foreseeable future.
When you do a value like that, do you include like 88 to 98, or do you do like 88 to 94 and then 95 to 98?
We're gonna do the whole generation, so all the way through 2000 for the heavy duty trucks, and so might as well just get it all in one pass. While we're looking at it. Yeah, there are segments that are probably going to be considered a little bit more collectible to some. I mean, because hey, let's face it, there's still that segment of collector out there that says 25 years. If it's not 25 years, it's not collectible. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. But yeah, it's one of those things where we have to look at some of those subtle changes within the generation, like styling changes, and the change from throttle body injection to the Vortec engines. That's going to affect value a little bit. So we're doing them all, but we're looking at these changes within the generation to versus putting down a blanket value.
Not necessarily trucks, but you kind of made me think of it, the crew cab, which is what made me think of it, a crew being nothing collectible, and then a guy coming along, and now those are kind of hard to get in that OBS, so then that becomes kind of a collectible. Obviously, the two-door Tahoes, the two-wheel drives. Have you ever seen, and it doesn't have to be trucks, it doesn't, but have you ever seen something that just blew your mind, where you're like, and maybe that was the Hondas, but where you're like, I never in a million years thought that this would become A, this popular, and B, collectible at all. And all of a sudden, people have made it that way.
You mentioned it, the two-door Tahoes. I was looking at, we added them to the price guide. They're out there on our website right now on Hagerty.com/valuation tools. You can look it up. We have the Blazer Tahoe Yukons. There's a Yukon GT that sold for high 20,000 range. I never thought they were going to be that high. I mean, they're phenomenal trucks, but I didn't think that they'd catch on that quick.
Yeah, and the Yukon GT is even harder because obviously it's the GMC version, and the GT, even the GMC GT Sierra, they're not that easy to find too. So if you got a guy that wants that sticker, he wants that label, you're putting it all in one package there with the GMC Yukon GT. So that's pretty rad. I could see that. I'd want that. They're also coming back too in the paint. You know, you're seeing that wild and crazy paint. We're seeing guys repop some of the wheels that were popular. The 15s now, you can get them in big numbers, big series 2022, 2022s. So it's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to watching and seeing how these things do.
Cool. Anything else? Any advice for our audience? Anything to think about? Anything that we didn't cover?
I mean, the one thing that I do want to cover is just, the fact that, we're talking about values and desirability and all that. I think the best piece of advice, though, that we can give anybody is, buy what you love, drive what you love, because the worst investment you can make is buying something you don't like.
Yeah, enjoy the hell out of it. You know what I mean? And that's what's so cool about the passion, the automotive passion. And just like we talked about with the Honda and the guys that are, in that community, it's cool because you're like, I just want you to like cars and get out and drive them and have fun. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Greg. It's been fun to get to know you and talk valuations. I think we really went through most everything that I had, and I look forward to. Do you ever come down to the auction down here? Do you ever come down to Barrett?
Yeah. I've been going the past 5 years.
Okay. Well, I drink beer. If you do, then we'll get a beer when you come down this year, and we'll hook up.
All right. I'd look forward to it.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.
Thanks.